So Josh is with us today, Josh Nelson. Josh is the founder and CEO of Zencastr. Is that correct, Josh?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. So Josh has done it. Josh has been around the block when it comes to building these tech companies. We'll kind of jump into a few questions, but Josh, let's learn a little bit about who you are and tell us about yourself. Just kind of a nutshell.
Yeah, grew up in Texas, moved around a lot, spent some time in Idaho, like you guys as well, and
it's probably what made you that really entrepreneur, really successful. Those years in Idaho, right, Austin?
They really teach you how to hustle over there.
It's funny. I was living with some family out there, and my uncle that I was living with was kind of there was always this contention in the house where the mom was trying to get all the kids to go to college, and the dad was like, "Forget about college, it's stupid." But yeah, so it was just about myself, man, all over. I move around a lot. I've got into startups in LA. I dropped out of college, got my first startup job in a company called Mahalo in Los Angeles.
What were you going to school for? Like, what were you starting to do? Was it in computer science?
I wanted to be like a mechanical engineer, but
Sounds hard.
Yeah, it was like all this math that I didn't want to do.
I don't know a single dumb electrical engineer, mechanical engineer. I was always leaning on them in my computer science classes to get through stuff.
Yeah, no, that was the thing. You got to take all of this math, and it's not like I couldn't do it, but I realized that there was other guys in these classes that were really enjoying this stuff, and I thought maybe
this isn't for me.
Yeah.
He's like, these guys are loving it. I'm over here like, this sucks.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I did like about it was like the problem solving aspect. We need something that's this big, weighs this much, got to do this, and is hopefully efficient and works well, right? And so as I was kind of trying to find my path, I took a web design class as like an elective, and I was just like, wow, this is like engineering, but you can see the things move and it does stuff, and you don't have to. The computer does the math for you, and like
you're like, wait, I don't have to do it. We have tools, or we're building tools to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm still solving problems, but I don't have to have nearly as much math. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that was kind of where it came from, and so I just got kind of sucked down that path, and I just kind of became obsessed with programming and building things, and the potential that I saw there was just fun. It was like Legos on steroids, I guess. And so I wasn't trying to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a programmer. This is like my new thing. And I'd heard that at startups, they give you like free lunch. And as a poor college kid, I was like, hey man, I'm going to get me some of those perks, And so I started kind of heading towards the startup scene. And anyway,
for free food. That's what that was.
Yeah, more or less. Like, no, there was a company in LA that was programming in Python and Django, which is what I was really interested in at the time, and they were hiring, and so I got a job with them. Happened to be the CEO of that company was Jason Cahlan, who does like the This Week in Startups podcast and podcast network and all that stuff. He used to have like guys like Elon Musk coming in and doing interviews in the office, and so I just kind of got really sucked into the startup culture at that point, and I realized after working there that, I kind of got to see what I don't know if high scale is the right word, but a much higher scale than my personal website, right? How that works and the systems in place. And I kind of got a little bit of confidence that maybe I could build something myself. I was a bit delusional. I mean, it ended up being there's so many more soft skills. I kind of really just thought it was about building a product, not even a product, like an application.
Just building code, just to be able to code, right?
I thought it was just about the code, Yeah. And then I learned pretty quickly that that's not all it's about.
That might be our headline right there. Like I thought it was about the code, but really it's not, right? That's pretty
cool. And so, I really enjoy that side of things, but there's been many times, and even now in the business, where we've had to let's get some other skills. You're gonna have to learn a little bit of sales, a little bit of how to, run customer support, how to lead people, how to do, even before all that, product validation. And, I made that mistake. The first business I tried to build with some buddies, we were all musicians, and we wanted to build this app for musicians. And we thought, since we were musicians, we didn't really need to talk to musicians because we know we got this, right?
You know,
It's like, yeah, I'm the customer. It makes sense. I know exactly what the market wants, right? And I think a lot of people just starting their companies kind of get kind of sucked into that mentality for sure. It's super easy to do. And I think that's like a good segue. Let's kind of jump into like your background and like before, a little bit before Zencastr, but like how did you get started and what did you like when did you realize that you needed to create Zencastr?
So I left Mahalo after like 18 months. That was the company in LA. LA was just too big for me.
you were in LA, right?
Yeah, like Santa
Living
Monica.
there.
So
Okay.
surrounded by LA with the beach on the side. So it's not a horrible place. It's just expensive, and
Yeah.
it's surrounded by LA.
Yeah.
And so
It's surrounded by LA. Enough said.
yeah. So I was like, I really wanted to do startups, but LA is too crazy. I went to Boulder. I moved to Boulder, Colorado, because I'd heard like Techstars is out of there, and I was just like, I'm just gonna move out there and then figure out. I'm gonna bug them until they start talking to me, and so that's what I did. And they
That's so
turned me down
cool.
like 3 or 4 times, but eventually they said, hey, maybe you don't have like a good business idea right now, but or traction or anything, but we like what you're building. Let's hire you as a developer in residence to help the other companies get their products ready for demo day. So I was like, hey, that sounds cool. I'm just trying to get involved any way I can anyway. So I did that for the summer 2012 class or whatever, so just that was a great experience. Got to kind of see how they run Techstars from the inside, got to see like which companies made it and which ones didn't and how many didn't make it, and it was just kind of a good way to, again, see how the sausage is made and, again, delude myself into thinking that I could do it too. Anyway, I left there, started a company called Soundkeep.
Soundkeep?
Soundkeep.
Okay.
Just Soundkeep like that.com. And the idea was it's kind of like a GitHub for music, a place for electronic musicians to collaborate and create music together online. You could remix each other and all this stuff.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a fun idea. We never really got it fully off the ground, I think, in the right way. But also, I think we just had a flawed thesis from the beginning, which was that musicians wanted to collaborate like this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the blind spot that we had is that we were musician programmers. Mm-hmm. So we knew about GitHub and how all that works and that open source ethos and whatnot. That is not how most musicians think. I mean,
yeah, those are two sides of the brain, aren't they?
yeah. Yeah. And, because for me, music was more of a hobby. It was something for fun. I wasn't trying to like cut tracks and make an album and get signed or anything. But for guys that they do not want anybody taking their audio or doing anything with it or even remixing it or anything. Like that was like, no, that's my baby. That could be my hit. Nobody's touching it. Right. So that was, I think, the big problem there. Now, there were other companies that were doing, a lot of these popped up at that time because that's right when the web audio and hit the scene. And so there was all these new tools in the browser, and it was like, oh, not only could you, maybe do something like Ableton Live, but in the browser with collaboration, and saw like this really cool idea. And some did go on and do that and had some successful exits and whatever. But we didn't have any money. We were just doing this ourselves, and I don't think we didn't have anything we could pitch to get money, really. At least I wasn't at the point at that time where I could convince investors without any traction or revenue to, give me money. That's a tough sell.
Very. Hold on, listeners. That's a really tough sell to sell on an idea, right? You got to have traction, right? And you've been through the process, and we'll go over that, but that's a good little gem right there for sure.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't try, because I did, but you start to learn pretty quickly that I wouldn't say I wasn't like laughed out of the room, but you start to notice that the people that were really honest with me were like, look, this is not something we've only seen before, but like dozens of times, and it never works. And, music, trying to start a startup in music at all is kind of like a red flag for most investors. You have to like get over that hump because it's such a treacherous space to be in. There's nobody's making money really.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to paint that picture. But anyway, moving on, that didn't really work out. But
it definitely got you into like the world of audio, right? Like this is probably something where you're like, okay, we understand the world of audio. We understand like there's needs here. And that probably kind of pivoted to where we're at now, right?
Yeah, like when we started building SoundKeep, it was right when the web audio API was coming out. Even kind of before, it was just when there was some of these like HTML5 audio elements coming out. And as we were building it, they started launching like the Get User Media API and like just all the web audio nodes that you can filter audio and pipe it around and do stuff. And so it was kind of like, man, we're doing this audio stuff, and now all this really cool audio stuff is coming. And anyway, I did that did get me to learn like what the capabilities are here, and we just had the wrong application for it. But as we were pitching that around, I think I went to like Techstars for a day in San Antonio because I was still trying to get in with this new company, and which didn't work. But again, you just can't, especially Techstars, their deal flow is so high that if you don't have traction in a pretty much successful business already, it's not worth it. They got too many options.
Waste the time. Yeah.
That used to be different, 10 years ago, but that's not how it is anymore. Anyway, I learned all the capabilities of that stuff, had the wrong application. I was in San Antonio talking to like some of their mentors, and I think these were just like other people that were in their current Techstars class. And one of them just said, look, I don't know about music, but I know podcasters have a problem with audio quality, and this same thing that you built could help with them. And he's like, I know 15 of them that would pay for something like this. And I was like,
and who was this?
I don't even remember, to be honest. It was just
like somebody you were just talking to, right?
It was one of the mentors at the Techstars. It was like mentor dating. You get like 5 minutes with this guy, 5 minutes with this guy, and it was just one of the things one person said.
5 minutes and your life changed.
It kind of,
seriously, that's crazy. That's super awesome.
Well, what was funny is when he said it, I was like, that's cool, but we're a music company. We don't do pod. I know what we're building. All right, that's just kind of
leave me alone.
It was kind of my attitude. I even brought that back to the team of guys, and we even whiteboarded it what it would be, and then I just think none of us really knew enough about it, and we were still kind of attached to our music idea, and so we just moved on, and let that come, rode that one into the ground. And then, the team kind of fell apart, and I moved to Australia to chase my now wife. And
you won, by the way, apparently.
Yeah. No, it worked. And while I was there, I found out we had a baby on the way. Before that, I had actually shifted gears. I was like, look, I want to build Ableton Live in the browser with collaboration. I'll do it myself if I have to. I think this is awesome. And I thought the capabilities were there. It still would be hard to do that even today, at least to be competitive, right? You could have a toy, but it's not going to drag people off of Ableton unless you had something really high tech. Anyway, that's what I was building. Then I found out we had a baby on the way, and I was like, okay, I don't really know how this could take me years. I don't really know what the path to revenue is, and I got some more immediate problems coming my way. And so I was like,
adventures, we like to call them. Okay, sometimes my children are problems. Okay, fair enough.
I shouldn't have said problems, but like at the time I was like, I got to solve for this situation. Like, I've got a baby on the way. My wife was from New Zealand, and she wanted to have the baby there, so nobody would hire me. I was applying for places in the US, but I was like, yeah, I really love a job. In 3 months I do have to leave to New Zealand for like 9 months or more, or however long it was going to be. And that was nobody wanted to do that. And so and this is before remote was as popular. So yeah, I decided, hey, let's prototype something really quick. I started talking to some podcasters. I finally decided, okay, let's talk to some people, potential customers first. But I didn't do that much. I talked to like 5 guys, and one of them was like, I'll pay you $20 a month for that. And when I heard that, I was like, hey, I could build this quick enough to just try. And I wanted to anyway. It sounded like a fun project. And because I had all the kind of pieces, and I'd been learning about all this stuff, and I was like, finally I can put it together, something that maybe works for something that's a total product. So I started off on like a 6-week prototype thing. Like 6 or 8 months later, I finally had, a very rough working prototype. And it was more of an alpha.
That you developed yourself, right? Because you're a web developer. That's your thing.
Yeah, no, it was just me at that point. I started there in Australia, came back to the US for a bit, then I went to New Zealand. That's where I launched the beta. I mean, aside from that it was buggy, it actually was working for a lot of people, and they were sharing it. Other people were signing up. Their guests were signing up after they recorded. And so I was like, oh, wow, because I think with SoundKeep, we got I don't know, maybe 50 people to sign up. Like there people would check it out, but it wasn't that compelling. And this, so I was like, hey, like people are signing up every day. This is something's better than before. Like this is different.
That's quite the undertaking.
I was going to say that's product market fit, right? That alone.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I don't know if I was even thinking about it in those terms at the time, but I was just like, this is more fun than people not using it. And I'm getting feedback now. And
weird. Having a business is more fun when you have customers. So.
Yeah. And it does. And that was really when it kind of became easier, because once you have a product that people are using and they're giving you constant feedback, then you don't have to hunt really, it comes to you what, you have to process it. But at that point in time, there was just so many obvious features that we didn't have, and I could rank them based on how many people wanted which ones the most. And, we're still in that phase, to be honest. So
still in that like early stage.
Well, I think what we realized is that podcasters are not typically audiophiles. And this, at this point, we were just audio. They don't care so much about the audio quality in and of itself, which was our main value proposition. We can help
because you guys were
studio quality. Yeah. So for a while, I thought I was kind of caught up in just focusing on that, which was the right thing to do. But as time went on, we had all these people coming in and signing up, and they would record, and you start talking to them. They're trying to find and grow their audience. They're trying to get a message out. They're trying to sell a product. They're not trying to record in studio quality. Like that's a means to an end for them. They like that because it helps them find and grow their audience or get their message out. And so, we're in the process of, we actually just raised a round of financing, and we're in the process of basically expanding our tool set and feature set to be kind of a full service platform for podcasters, because there's the recording piece, but it's like, you got to find your guest first. You got to know what your podcast is even about. Then you got to schedule it. Then you got to edit it, which takes most of the time. Most of these guys are spending like 6 hours per episode on average. Just to publish a single episode that maybe 150 people listen to on average again. So
we need to appreciate the guys that edit all of our videos for us then.
Seriously.
Well, I mean, intense. Just the fact that you have guys editing your videos for you means it's that hard, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's fair.
True. Yep.
Imagine if you were using Instagram and you needed a professional editor to help you publish and post it. Like that's where podcasting is right now. And even notwithstanding that fact, there's still like a couple million podcasts out there. So imagine what happens if you can take that time of creation and cut it down to like maybe where most of the time you spend creating your podcast is just the conversation, and everything else is kind of automated and kind of a few clicks away. That's the goal.
And I want to say congrats on raising another round. That's like a huge deal, and that's something that we should talk about a little bit more. But when did you know that this, like, you had traction with your product? Like you said at the beginning, like you were getting, people signing up every single day. But when did you decide, like, this is the thing, I'm going to go all in, I'm going to build a team, and we're going to build something, just life-changing for people, right?
Yeah. So I launched it in New Zealand. I ran it for about a couple years, just by myself, programming. I was, so this was actually our first round of financing. This one we just did. It's been bootstrapped up until now, partially because I didn't have a compelling. I kind of quit trying because I realized after a while you can't sell unless you have traction or like a pedigree. You're pretty much wasting your time unless you just get super duper lucky. I kind of just was contracting on this. I got a job that was let me work, kind of half to 3/4 time. And then the rest of the time I spent on Zencastr. There was a point where it was just taking too long. It was really hard to keep up with it, just doing it on the side like that. So there was a point when after we left New Zealand, we went to Thailand just because my visa expired and we wanted to go somewhere that was kind of affordable and hopefully fun and all that stuff to just launch it, and where I didn't know anybody. I wanted just total solitude so I could just focus. So we found this little villa with a pool in the jungle and on this island off of an island on a dead end road, and just parked in and built Zencastr.
Josh, when they make a movie of your life, I want to watch it, because like,
yeah, this is crazy.
We've been to Australia, New Zealand. Now we went to a remote island in Thailand just so you can focus and finish this project.
Yeah. I mean, at least that was how I saw it. I didn't want like kid birthday parties, nothing. I just needed to focus on this. And so, and it was like a fun place where my wife liked to be, and I could, she was happy for me to ignore her most of the time while they were hanging out on the beach and whatnot. But I launched it. Well, and I had to quit my job at a certain point, because I was like, I'm not getting anywhere fast enough. So I quit my job, and I took out I applied for 4 credit cards on the same day so that they wouldn't
know about each other.
Yeah. And so I just totally maxed out my credit and just lived on credit cards until I kicked on the paid plans. So that kind of put me in a position where I had to do it. And
you committed yourself.
Yeah.
I
finally, and I think at that point we had maybe people were recording 10,000 hours a month on the service.
Oh wow!
And so I was like, there's people are using it. There's something here. Whether or not they're going to pay.
Wait, had you monetized by this point?
No.
Oh my gosh! So you're telling me you had all these people using your product and you had not monetized? What? Why?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that I just didn't have the money to grow a team, right? After we started making money, then I hired our first engineer. But I think maybe a more interesting question is how, because doing audio and recordings and all that stuff, I think at the end I was paying, maybe before we launched paid plans, it was costing me about $300 or $400 a month, which could have been a lot more.
I was gonna say your cost wasn't crazy high on it.
No, it wasn't. And the key there was, at least initially, is I didn't store anybody's data. I mean, the very first version of Zencastr didn't even have VoIP built into it. It didn't have video. It just sat. You had to use Skype alongside of it, and it just you also opened Zencastr, and so did your guests, and it would record them and then give you those files, but you still had the conversation through Skype. But in order to use Zencastr, you had to link your Dropbox account, and I would just send all that data straight to your Dropbox account, so that I didn't have to pay for any of the ingress or the storage costs. I mean, that ended up being a clever way to offset costs, but that was really the only reason why, was just because I didn't have a path to revenue yet on it, and I was like, I'm not paying for this if I don't have to. So
yeah, that's super, super clever. And I want to say too, the product just in and of itself, you said, you built a 6-week roadmap basically on getting something out. It took somewhere between 6 and 8 months. And so that right there should, show people the complexity that goes into it. It's a specialty to do both audio and video, engineering. Not any developer can just get those skills and just start doing stuff. I still don't even work on audio. And I have people approach us all the time for iOS apps and doing some sort of audio, I don't know, meter gnome things that I don't understand. And just, it's crazy. And so the fact that you just committed all in, was that super hard from just a development standpoint, getting familiar with all those things? Let's talk about that really quick too. And then let's jump into was it just a money thing that you just that's creative, just to decide, hey, I'm going to go put audio in this Dropbox and we're going to use Skype and do all this stuff. How did you put all those pieces together? That's just amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to say
you're giving me too much credit. We were just trying to figure shit out.
Yeah, I'd love to say it was a master plan, but it was really just one foot after the other. And I didn't have any experience with audio programming or any DSP background or any of that. I mean, I now have learned some of that stuff, but when we now have specialized media engineers that are the real pros there. They're way, way more advanced than I was. Basically just, it was more, I kind of just brute forced my way into figuring it out rather than that I was especially talented or anything. But
creative, you just kind of just bulge your way through it, right?
Yeah.
You found a problem.
No, that's creative perseverance for sure.
100%. You just figured it out, right? A problem arose and you just figured a solution.
I think the biggest contributor to the success was that I was enjoying it. I liked what I was doing. If I hadn't been, because I remember when there was a point in the company where I wasn't making money, but a lot of people were using it, and I was customer support as well as engineering, and I just got totally bogged down, and to where most of my days were support, and then I would like look forward to like the nights and weekends where I could actually program. And so I think just kind of like I don't know if you guys ever surfed, but like I lived in Hawaii for a little bit, and
Of course you
I
did.
tried surfing, and it's one of those things where you may not catch a wave the whole time you're out there. You have to just enjoy the process of the paddling, and if you enjoy that part, then you're gonna like surfing, and then you're gonna catch some waves. But if you don't, then it's probably not the right sport. You need to go. Maybe basketball is for you.
That's seriously huge for everybody listening, just because I don't think people realize the amount of effort and work that goes into like running with these tech companies. Like, you're not just working with a developer and like coming out with a cool product. Like, you're raising money, you're doing customer support, you're in sales, you're clearly, like you just said, you're working, I'm going to imagine somewhere between like 12, 18 hours a day between your full-time job, handling messages, doing either sales or discovery. And then
he has a new
at night,
he has a new baby. Don't forget
he has
that.
a new baby on the way. And so it's just like the grind of going in every single day, like, is going to be there. And I think some people just assume it's easy or it should happen fast. And it's just not true. It's going to take time and dedication. And I think most of all, perseverance. Like, what you did was hard. And so that's like, that's super awesome. That's crazy.
I think I think you also like you put it in a term that's really like, paddling is the grind of surfing, right? Like, that's the hardest part of surfing. That and the chafing of the chest and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we'll talk about that, but like honestly, the grind of surfing is the paddling. But if you can get to the point where you enjoy the worst part of what you're doing, everything else is worth it, and you can continue to do that grind because you actually enjoy it. So like, I think that's an awesome like little nugget for our listeners. Like, do something you really do enjoy, and then once you enjoy it, like when you enjoy the worst part of your job and you still enjoy it, like, dude, you're living. Like, that's really what it comes down to. You enjoy what you do every day, whether it's 15 or 30 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
And a question for you: how long? So I've heard 6 to 8 months of development. Now you're to the point where you've got 10,000 hours being recorded. How long did you go before you even took a paycheck, like, in total? Because that's the other thing. Like, I feel like most entrepreneurs are like monetized like super early, and I think that just shows the passion you had for this project.
Definitely that was part of it, but I think it just wasn't ready, or at least I didn't feel like it was ready to charge for, was the bigger problem. And I would always get these emails where people are like, I mean, and I was probably wrong. I mean, because people were telling me even long before I started charging that that I should be charging them, and that they would pay, even more than I ended up charging for it. So it was, part of it was confidence. Like, it's scary. That's the point of reckoning. Like, when you turn on the money, that's when you really know. And I think I was afraid. I would almost rather, and I don't think this was a healthy way to approach it, but I think I was almost stuck where I was afraid to know that answer. And
you were scared that once you put a value to your product, nobody would want it anymore.
Yeah, I had a hard time imagining that I built something that had value, just because it had never happened to me before. Yeah. And I think I had a very high bar in my mind for what, like, there's a lot of these like AAA applications out there, like, I don't know, like a Facebook or a Spotify or something. And you're like, I need to be like, have all that stuff. And then you're like, but wait, they're billion-dollar businesses or multi-billion-dollar businesses who have teams of hundreds of engineers. Have some self-compassion around that part of things and realize it takes a lot of time and effort and growth of the business to get to that point where everything's just polished and everything's moving on all cylinders on all the different sides.
Such good advice, because we have so many people that are like, hey, build us TikTok. We're like, well, first off, like, we want to be the next Facebook. Facebook has hundreds, thousands of engineers doing these and building and stuff like that. And it's like, literally, get a product out, solve a problem, and what do you need to solve yesterday? And honestly, Austin and I, we harp on this all the time. Like, listen, I know you want your product to be this in 3 to 5 years, but what does it need to be yesterday? And it doesn't need to be near what it is in 3 years, right? And even right now, Zencastr alone, like, what you want Zencastr to be in 3 years is probably very different to what it is today, or even 6 months ago, a year ago, things like that. So I think that's such a good advice for our listeners. Like, hey, it's okay to like just solve a problem in the most simple way and then polish it later.
Well, and even if you know what that master plan is, you don't. Like, you think you know, but you don't know. And we were just having this conversation in a meeting today, where one of our members wanted to know, like, what does this look like in 12 months and 3 years? Once we know that, then we can figure out what we need now. And we're like, we know vaguely, we have an idea of what we want, but it's really an exploration that we're on. We're on a exploration journey. We don't know where the destination is yet. We think it's somewhere northeast, But,
yeah, and then sometimes these curveballs called like COVID like happen, right? And then it changes the whole. I bet you that was a huge pivot, which we can talk about. But like you have an idea where you want to go, but it's. I mean,
life just changes.
Yeah, and the sequence, even if in the end it's going to be all the same features together, the sequence at which you release those is really important, because there's kind of this dance where you've got to like build something that has value today, but also gets you further towards your goal tomorrow. That also doesn't leave your existing users behind or upset or cause, change it so that it's no longer serving them well. Right. And
so you're telling me, Josh, you need to learn how to walk a tightrope.
Kind of. Yeah. Once you have loyal creators on the platform, there's a whole other responsibility and they'll let you know if you screw up, for sure. Podcasters are not known to keep their mouths shut.
Yeah, for real. That's what they're passionate. So let's talk about like this journey you're on, right? Let's talk about like a struggle, like one of your most difficult challenges that kind of came up, whether it was early on, maybe it was yesterday. Like, what is a big challenge that you ran into, and how did you overcome that? Like, what was the process for that?
Yeah, I think one of the, and there's many, but I think one of the ones that comes to mind is transitioning the business from a solopreneur lifestyle business into something broader, something bigger, and now a high growth startup. That's not an easy transition to make. And it's, frankly, investors get scared when they're like, oh, you're a lifestyle business and now you want to be a startup, because they're like, do you know how to start up? Because it's not like running a lifestyle business.
So let me make sure I understand, and our listeners understand. So the transition from like, hey, this is me and a couple of people building this and it's maintaining my lifestyle and we're happy with it, to I want to be able to get funding and I want to build this into a huge company. I want to build this thing. I want to grow it rather than maintain and keep me happy day to day. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think kind of what happened is I was building a lifestyle business, but I also made some decisions early on that primed the company really well for a startup. Namely, I've always had free plans. Obviously, when we were open beta, it was free. But then when we kicked on paid plans, again, because I had such little confidence in the pricing or how to, because it's $20 a month then, and it's still $20 a month, and that's really just because my buddy Al told me he'd pay me $20.
Hey, I'll pay $20.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
So I think I wasn't honest. I didn't realize this about myself, but I think I had the startup mentality already, and I just didn't. It was too big of a dream for me to think of by myself, and so I kept my expectations low. I was like, I want. I don't know if you're familiar with the 30 by 500 book. Amy Hoy, I think, is the author, but it's about how to get financial freedom by just getting 500 people to give you $30 a month, doing whatever. That gives you 15 grand a month. And that, for most people, you can find a way to kind of, live well. Yeah. You're not worried about day-to-day finances. So that was my like base goal. And I wanted the financial freedom. I wanted geographic freedom and decision-making autonomy, whereas kind of the goals that I had going into this. But I was also like, I don't want to give anybody a reason not to use Zencastr. I want everybody in the world to use this thing. That would be great. And so I always kept the free plans. Once we started charging, we actually did pretty well. I mean, because I waited so long, it was kind of like popping the clutch on like an engine revving high already. I think we did 12 to 15K MRR in that first month. And then just kind of been growing organically.
So let's talk about that month, Josh, because you're nervous, right? You are scared to do a premium service. You're scared nobody's going to want it. All of a sudden, boom, 15K of monthly reoccurring revenue comes in like that. What was that feeling like?
By the end of the month, when I figured out how much it was it was a magical time for sure. But I think the moment when it really dawned on me, it was the first payment that came through, because I had like Stripe up and I had like I had my notifications, so it would ding me if I got a payment, and the first one came in, and I was just like, hot diggity dog, it worked.
Hot diggity dog.
Somebody, your confidence just every time that little ding happened, the confidence went up a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, I kept that ding on for longer than I care to admit, because it was just I got
revenue.
Yeah,
that's revenue.
Satisfying.
Yeah. But it was, I think that very first payment came in, I was like, wow, holy crap, somebody somewhere. And I know who it is. It's our first paying user, and he's still a paying user of Zencastr. And the idea that I was making money while I was sleeping was pretty relieving and intoxicating after going through like, I had like 70, 80 grand on credit cards at this point.
I was just going to say, you max credit cards out, or you're living on like borrowed money, and all of a sudden when you're sleeping, that money's being paid, like real money.
Yeah.
Man,
So,
our listeners are just drooling right now. They're just like, dude, I cannot wait for that.
To answer your question though, the hard thing, that was like the good part, I guess. The hard part was, now that I've got money, and now that I've got a company that is kind of primed for growth with the freemium plans and all that stuff, and it was growing, and it just kept growing every month. I mean, that's the beauty of SaaS, is unless you're screwing up, like it just keeps growing every month. You got more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
The podcasting space when I started was kind of boring. Like nobody, it was small. Nobody really cared about it. There was like these dedicated players, but it wasn't like a big thing. Like there wasn't money in it, right? For like a big funded company to come in and like, build a multi-billion-dollar business on, right? But as I was building this and launched it, that's when like Serial came out, and This American Life, and these are the ones that got like 1 million downloads per episode and got real popular. And then everybody, Spotify, Amazon, Google, I think Facebook is a podcasting initiative now, Apple, all the big players are now diving into the space. And so it's kind of this thing of like, it was a hot space. It was already growing. We were seeing that in our numbers. Then all these big players got involved. And then it was kind of like, not only does this company want to grow, but if you don't step on the gas, you're just going to be eaten up by these big, well-funded players coming into the market. And I think that podcasting is a really cool space. I think the free and open kind of podcasting ecosystem, I think, is important. I think it makes the world a better place. And I think podcasters deserve really great tools built by people who are kind of, grassroots players and are not just trying to come in and take over podcasting and turn it into something else, that only maybe benefits them, right? The owner, the big business. So yeah, it was kind of it was a double-sided thing. Like, hey, this has got legs and it's getting crowded out there. So, and that led up to the reason for raising money, just to accelerate. Because it's been really clear since the early days of Zencastr what this like full featured podcast creation network could be. But getting to that point with someone who had such little resources and such a small team and starting from basically nothing has been hard. And just deciding to go down that road. Because quite frankly, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about venture capital up to that point, because I had been, basically snubbed over and over. And I was also really proud of the fact that we bootstrapped it to, it was about 2 million ARR before we raised. So,
wow, geez, that's super awesome.
And I'm just going to say that I bet you it was way different story going into these VCs with the 2 million ARR than it was with, hey, I have this really cool idea.
Yeah, seriously.
No, it was a totally different conversation. But I think COVID is actually what I think really gave us the right foundations. Because even with that revenue, I wasn't doing any marketing because our users kind of marketed it themselves for us. And so it was organic growth. But we hadn't really tried to grow it big. And so we didn't have like major growth numbers. And I always felt like there's a lot more product that we need to build. That's how we do right by our existing users is make the product better for them rather than trying to focus on, getting as many people into the product before it's where I want it to be.
When did you decide to make the pivot to video? And was that like a pretty challenging decision? Was it just you when you did that?
Well,
or was that from the beginning? And you guys were like, this is part of our plan.
Well, from the very beginning, people were like, oh man, if you had video, it'd be awesome. And I was like, that is so impossible right now.
Wait. Let's get Skype.
Yeah, I mean, we could do the live video, but recording video in the browser and doing it at a decent frame rate and decent bit rate and all this stuff, just the tools just weren't there. It's still just barely possible, to do well. But this was COVID, back to what we were talking about before. This was what changed the game for us for raising. I mean, we could have raised before, but it would have been kind of on the VC's terms because we weren't we didn't have like double digit growth. We had like a profitable business, but it's kind of like from their perspective, a lifestyle business, even though it was growing, it wasn't like takeoff growing. Can you switch to us? There's just a lot of questions. And it was like, we could have raised, but we would have had to take a deal that we probably weren't super happy with. And we didn't need to because we were profitable and growing. And so, but then
you got to be in the driver's seat when it came to the raising.
Exactly. And I think that's really critical. I've toyed with raising 3 or 4 different times at different times during the stage of the company. And those first few times it was just like, I'm not getting what I want out of this. I'm just going to go back and keep building my business. And then we can, revisit later if it makes sense. Once I kind of learned what they were looking for, then COVID hit and we had I think we had 25% revenue growth in April.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy.
It's the opposite for most businesses, right?
Yeah. No, we, just luckily we're in the right place for that. And it actually, people really leaned into podcasting at that time because I think they were either worried about their employment and wanted to start that side gig that they've always been working on, or they just had more time on their hands to start the podcast. So that really helped with the fundraising, but also it shifted our roadmap because we were building, we had some other stuff we were working on at the time, but when COVID hit, everybody got sent home and we started noticing that a lot of big production companies like Vox Media or College Humor or any of these guys were actually using Zencastr, not even for their podcasts, but for their video production stuff. And so we always wanted to have video, but it just seemed like, hey, this is a really great time to launch that. The reason why we think video is really amazing for podcasters proper and not just people who want to use remote video recording for other things is podcast has a huge discoverability problem. It's hard you can't share these long form audio clips, the audio only podcasts in particular, because in even video, if it's in long form, right? It's hard to share. It's hard to know if you want what's in it. If you are you willing to spend the time to figure out if this 45-minute show is interesting for you? The answer is no, most often, right? And there's no visibility into any of the podcast content. And so it's just majorly hard to grow an audience that way. However, if you combine it with video and, then it's a more native format. And if you have transcriptions and all this stuff, then it's kind of like a content chameleon, if you will. It can just fit in wherever you want to put it. And you can tap into the growth and the, if you on YouTube, for instance, they go and they find your audience for you. You don't have to go find them. You post the video, they have an algorithm recommends and they bring them to you. And that's why everybody uses YouTube, even though it's not the only place to host video. There's dozens or hundreds, maybe.
Wait, there's more than just YouTube?
Right?
That's weird.
But it's because that's where people know they're going to find and grow their audience rather than anything else. And so I think that adding that video component to the podcast gives it that ability to help you find and grow your audience on lots of different platforms. And so we found that podcasts with video grow 4 to 5 times faster.
And we've even noticed a huge difference. Obviously we have the audio piece, but that's exactly what we do is we take out little clippets with the video, post them on LinkedIn, kind of do whatever, write transcripts or whatever else.
And we're making content.
So it's really just been a huge content pool. And it's been super exciting for us. And I've got an interesting question for you because I think a lot of people listening to this, they're probably not developers, right? You've gone and you've done all this as a developer, and so that comes with its own set of challenges. But tell us about the time, when you started getting the revenue you wanted, and you wanted to maybe even get a little bit more time back. When did you bring on your first developer, and what were you looking for in that developer? What kind of developer were they? Tell us about that journey of growing your team.
Because you're a developer yourself, right? So you kind of had an idea, where was your weaknesses and how did you find compliments to it?
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to like, I think one of the big struggles of transitioning in the business was part of the reason why I started my own business is I wanted kind of just ultimate freedom. And I also didn't want to be a manager. I didn't want to have a boss, but I also didn't want to have him be managing. I didn't want to be the boss either. And so my first engineer, I wasn't even hired. I mean, I think I got interviewed by indie hackers, and somewhere in there I just put like, if you're a developer looking for work, hit me up. And
on a cardboard sign on the side of the road.
Yeah, basically. And Andre, our first engineer, wrote me. He was building his own side project. It was using a lot of the same technology, WebRTC, and some web audio stuff. And he was trying to basically do what I had done, which is work part-time and then build your project on the side. I was happy to pay it forward and kind of carry, pass the torch on to the next guy. And because that's what my buddy Al had done for me. I think he could have probably found someone who was more dedicated to getting stuff done at their company, but I think he was kind of happy and excited, and he's now an investor and a advisor of the business as well. So Andre, he just was like, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I'd love to help." And I was like, "I need help, so you should come join me." But it was just me and him for quite a while.
Well, what did Andre do? What type of development did he do?
He's a JavaScript engineer. I mean, we're a Node.js on the back end, all kind of JavaScript in the browser, obviously. And
Austin, will you translate that? Is that mostly web?
Yeah, it's all web stuff. Well, so, web backend stuff.
Josh, I'm not a developer, as you can tell.
Okay. Yeah, no, we kept it pretty simple. So just one programming language for the back end and the front end. So we didn't have to have, that was also just part of, because I started it myself and was trying to keep things simple. But he, growing the team and kind of getting over my fear of managing. Well, actually, I don't think I did. I actually just hired someone to manage for me. And so I really only manage like 2 people. That it works better for me. I'm not the guy that's going to be all over the place running teams left and right. Like, it's just not who I am. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. But I'm happy to pay someone else to do that.
Well, having that self-reflection is super important. I think a lot of entrepreneurs instead get into this habit, especially I think like books create this a lot too. It's like everybody thinks that they need to go learn something and be fantastic at it, and like they should be able to do everything by themselves, versus like really looking within and being like, I'm really good at this and I don't want to touch that at all. And I think once you get to that point, that's when you really start to grow and scale up.
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of develop that confidence of being okay to say that to yourself. Like, I don't have to be good at that. I can be bad at that, in fact, and just let someone else do it. I mean, this was actually a really big transitional point in the business, this idea of switching from. So with Andre, I had started hiring people, and I think we'd hired a couple customer support reps. And then I had like my brother-in-law who was doing like the finances and the bookkeeping and all that. But then I kept in touch with my buddy Adrian Lopez, who actually I met at Mahalo at my very first company. He stayed in LA. He went to a bunch of startups, like 14 or 15 different startups. And then he ended up being the first engineer, part of the founding team at a company called Flipagram. And they became the fastest growing app in the App Store ever. And then they got bought by ByteDance and rolled up into what became TikTok. And so he had this
we were just talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
No, on our thing, I was like, everybody's like, build me TikTok.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, TikTok, it's great. I mean,
and you know a guy that did build you TikTok. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'd kept in touch with him. He kept in touch with me. And as I was telling him what was going on in the podcasting space, he was like, dude, there's something here. I mean, looks exactly like what the early days of Flipagram looked like. And I know how to grow this and build this into something a lot bigger. And I was like, I need that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sold. I don't even know I was being sold, but yes.
But yeah, I mean, so I brought him on as a chief product officer and a co-founder, which is like almost 3 or 4 years in, which is maybe a bit unusual, but I kind of had come full circle of like starting it. I wanted ultimate independence and freedom to do everything. Then I started realizing that's a lot of work to have it all on your shoulders. And it's
a lot.
Yeah. And I also am not very good with the growth and marketing mindset and all that stuff. And so I think he really complimented me really well and had a great pedigree. has kind of seen this playbook before about how you grow and scale a user-generated content business.
Mm-hmm.
And once he came on, then we really kind of kicked into high gear, went and raised some money. I don't know, the team was like 5 people then, or 4 or 5. Now we're 25, 26. And
growing big.
so yeah, it's been really positive.
So Josh, I kind of have a question to kind of go along with that, and to kind of go along with kind of Austin's question. A lot of our founders they're not as technical as you, right? A lot of them might be better at other things, right? But they're not developers. What advice do you give to them who need to build some type of a technical program, and they have to rely on other people, whether it's dev shops or hiring a developer? What type of advice would you give to them?
I feel bad for that. That's a hard position to be in.
But I would say that's what 90% of our customers, obviously we're a dev shop, so people are coming to us like asking us to build projects, but like, what advice would you give them on when it comes to looking for that? Like, is there any type of advice you'd have that?
Man, this is a tough one because I don't know if I know.
You don't know.
I don't know.
Because you're a developer.
Yeah, it's not my experience. If I had to say, probably get a technical co-founder. Mm-hmm. You kind of need someone there, or I've never worked with an agency like yourself. I'm not totally familiar with how you guys operate, basically you need someone who you trust, who can be the guy who's running tech, and the tech guys need to be managed by someone who they can't sandbag or just run circles around. And you kind of have to, there's got to be a visibility, accountability, and all that stuff, because with code it's just too and it's not even like someone's trying to take you, like pull one over on you or anything like that.
But there's just so many different ways things can be done.
Exactly. A lot of engineers they're not running the business. They don't have the visibility you have on the market needs. They may be thinking
even not to have that.
Yeah. They may think that the most important thing for them to do is to like optimize this algorithm over, like, to make it perfect. And you're like, actually, that was the last thing we needed to do. But if you're not, if you don't have eyes on what they're doing, or you don't even understand what they're doing, it's really hard to say, hey, no, let's reprioritize. That's a good thing to do, but not what we're doing right now.
So you need someone that can communicate really, really well. So communication, I'd say, and then has a vision. Like they're not so like short-sighted of like, let's build this. It's more like, where are we going? And they think forward when it comes to building. There
needs to be somebody who has the technical know-how to manage the developers in a meaningful way, and also has their head up above the trees and is tracking the business goals.
So Josh, we didn't tell you to say that, but for those that are listening, that's what we do really, really well. Honestly, I don't develop, right? I'm not a developer, but I'm the client experience guy. I'm the communications guy. So, and that's one of the things we pride. That's one thing that is so essential when it comes to building is communication and vision, right? I would say that those are your two really, really big things. So my other question for you, Josh, I want you to tell me about a big failure, like just whether it's a funny story or like you just really fell on your face on something, and how'd you overcome it? Just a big failure. I think our listeners love hearing these stories.
Man, so when was this? I think I want to say it was 27 into 2017 or 28. I'm bad with year dates, but
it's a blur.
Yeah.
Whether I was in Thailand or Hawaii or New Zealand or Australia, I was somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I was at Podcast Movement. It's like the biggest podcasting conference in the US, at least, maybe the world. And I was on like day 3 there, and I started getting all of these bug reports.
Were you a vendor there as like a booth?
Yeah, we had a booth. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of getting to know our creators. A lot of them will go to that one, and you don't really pick up a lot of users, but you learn a lot from being able to just talk to people face to face. And what happened was Chrome had just launched their new an update to their browser, and it basically broke our app. Not in a way that was easy to tell, because we do test ahead, right? But what it would do is it would start dropping samples for some people. And if you do that over like a 45-minute call, and you got 2 people talking and one of them is missing little slivers, you don't hear it because they're so small. It's literally just like a few samples here and there. But over time, that stacks up to where the tracks drift out of sync. And before we were just mixing the tracks together, starting them at the same time, mixed together, it just worked. Now it created this huge editing nightmare for all these people who are used to just clicking one button.
Oh, and you're at a conference where everybody is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that wasn't the big part. That was just kind of what I remember. It's kind of like, where were you when the Twin Towers got hit or something? I was like, I remember kind of being like, oh man, this looks bad. And I wasn't in a place where I could really dig into it. And it actually took months and months to sort that out. We were having about 30% of our creators were having this drift problem. And it wasn't something that we could just fix or change because it was a problem in the internals of the browsers. And so we eventually had to like, I tried to learn a lot about DSP and packet loss, what do they call it? Packet loss concealment, I think is the technical term for this, but I could never really figure it out myself. And then we ended up just having to hire this guy who was like the first engineer at Viber and had built their whole WebRTC stack to come in and just fix it. But we didn't even get that started till like months later. So it was basically, there was just like a long period of time where a lot of our users were having a bad experience and were unhappy, and we couldn't do anything about it except for say we're sorry and we're working on it. And that was tough. And then I would say the part where I just really felt like I landed flat on my face was, I made a ticket report for this. I got some feedback from one of the Chrome internal web audio guys, like, hey, we've got this new thing that's going to come out and it's going to fix this. You just need to start using it this way, blah, blah, blah. So I do it. It was hard. I wasn't seeing it myself, and I couldn't really detect it when it was happening. And so I thought it was
Those
fixed.
are the worst bugs.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so I thought I fixed it. I launched a blog post and I wrote up a blog post and a newsletter that's like, hey, finally we fixed it. So sorry. And then launched that. And then the comments just filled with people that are like, it's not fixed. And I was just like, oh no. Cause that was like my last, like, I was literally like, can this company survive like this? Like, I was surprised, like that weekend when the drift happened, and like that week after when I realized there was nothing I could really do. I kind of just sat and waited to see if the company was I thought this was the end or the beginning. I thought we're just going to trickle down into like,
this is going to kill the company.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm surprised still that it didn't, but it just goes to show how like hard podcasting is and how bad and fractured the tool chain is,
that people were willing to work through that bug because it was still, even with that bug, it was still brought enough value. There was nothing else out there that was just as good.
Yep. And so that was a tough time for sure. Cause I just felt helpless and I felt embarrassed and I felt ashamed and all those things together.
Man. And I feel like our listeners love hearing that because they make mistakes too, right? Like those feelings that they feel are common with even a company as successful as Zencastr, right?
And I think something that's big to note here too is like your developer, like out of control, like they're like, you can go in and try and fix these bugs and learn as much as you can, but like in all reality, like you don't have a lot of control on what Chrome does or what Safari does to their software. And I think a lot of the people listening are obviously not technical, and that's how they feel when they run into problems, like, oh, there's this bug, and they're literally just sitting like twiddling their thumbs. That's how I feel when I'm waiting for marketing. I'm like no idea. I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs like, and no idea what's going on. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And now I'm super curious, like with that said, like, what would you tell you, Josh, in the beginning? Like if you could go back and maybe like give yourself like and give yourself like one nugget or piece of advice, like what would that be?
Man, my first inclination is to just keep my mouth shut, because I think if I knew what I was getting into from the beginning, I might not have done it, because it was just so much harder and took so much longer than I thought.
Austin, how many of our founders tell us that? They're like, man,
dude, a lot. And I think people just don't understand how much work it is.
But maybe we shouldn't tell them, because then they wouldn't get in and do it. Right, Josh? Like, honestly, it's probably worth it. But and once you're in the mix of it, it's worth keep going. But at that point, is it really worth it if you knew at the beginning, right?
Yeah. Now that I've thought about it, the one thing that I really, really do regret is taking so long to scale up the business, not because of the growth that the business could had or anything like that, but just the toll it took on myself. My health deteriorated over that time because I just, and I'm still trying to pull out of that, to be honest. It was weird because once you have something that's giving you value, tens of thousands of dollars a month, you can't let it go. It takes control, or you would probably regret, you'd kick yourself for the rest of your life, and you'd probably be the butt of a lot of jokes if you just decided to walk away from it, right? Or drop. Mm-hmm. But there was times where I was like, man, this is so stressful that I wish I could just walk away and not. It's almost like I wish that it didn't have so much value that I couldn't walk away from it.
That is such a hard thing. The fact that you have, hundreds of thousands of people like using a product, like walking away seems like an impossible decision to make.
Yeah, I couldn't, and that's not really what I wanted to do, but there were times when that feeling came up, and it didn't have to be that way. I was just doing it wrong. I was trying to put too much on myself. I was giving into my fears of growing the business and becoming a manager, and
the confidence, right?
Yeah.
There was a confidence issue as well. Like, would people be willing to pay for this? If you would have known, you probably would have monetized sooner. If you would have monetized sooner, you probably would have grew it a lot faster. I think there's a lot in there.
Oh yeah. There's like, I don't know, at least 18 months. If I did this over again, it could be done a lot faster.
Yeah.
And, there was actually an opportunity, like there's no reason. Anchor and Zencastr, for instance, started around the same time, and they were like there was kind of like a Twitter for podcasting thing was how they started. And then they pivoted and went with the free hosting. But I remember kind of watching what they were doing. Then they got acquired like 140 million or something like that. The timelines were the same and the spaces were the same. And there's no reason Zencastr couldn't have built and scaled and even sold a business in that time if that had been the goal. But I was just starting from a totally different place. Like, that wasn't my goal. In fact, I had a goal, I thought, in the contrary, where I was trying to like keep it small, bootstrapped, and I was planning on going to like MicroConf the next year. I was kind of into that start small, stay small kind of a thing, like what Rob, I've forgotten the name. It's a book. Start small.
That's so
small.
Funny. We're actually doing an episode with him.
What's his name again? Rob
Walling. Right?
Walling. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we jumped on just a quick discovery call with him just yesterday. So we have him scheduled to do a podcast with Rob this week.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, and I really think that that's great advice. Like, and that's kind of where my head was at. And that was part of the whole thing as well. But I think a lot of it was just me, like, I kind of built this business to help me run away from things I didn't like. And then it started helping me run into things I didn't like. And it was just a bit of a transition.
Josh, just so you know, I love your story, like your composure, and like there's such a twist on it that just is so, I would say, like, I don't know, inspiring and just interesting, like fascinating to hear, just because you did it, I would say, so differently than I would say like a lot of people might. And I just feel like you're like seriously happy with where you're at and like the journey, like everything. Like I just feel like you're bleeding with passion for this project and like what you've done. And it's just super awesome hearing your story.
You love what you do.
Oh, thank you.
Like,
thank you.
No, I think there are very few founders who could like have made it through that.
Yep. Like
very, very few. And I think Gary Vee like pushes it the best. Like if you don't love what you do, like you won't make it. And I think this is like a very, very clear story that shows that you loved what you're doing. So that's super awesome to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a lot of people internalize. I think I internalized that advice wrong in the beginning. I thought that meant I had to build a company around something I was passionate about. I've actually become passionate about podcasting, but I would when I first started, it was just like someone told me they'd pay me $20 a month. Yeah. But that's so funny. I think what it is you don't necessarily have to love the market or because a lot of businesses, in fact, most successful businesses are quite boring concepts, right? But if you love just building things and the process, then that's what I think I found is that I just enjoy trying to see if I can do this, see if I can make something stick. And it could be, podcasting, it could be something different.
No, Josh, it sounds like it's not so much you like surfing, but you like paddling.
Yeah, exactly. But catching a wave every now and then feels pretty good.
Yeah, but once you catch a wave, it's awesome. But you also love the hard part of it too, which is huge for our listeners to kind of understand. So, Josh, thanks so much for jumping on. How can our listeners, how can they find you? What's the best way to follow what you do and the things you put out?
So we have at Zencastr on Twitter. We got our blog.zencastr.com. We also have our new podcast called Digital Nomad. We've got 4 episodes now, and it basically is the extended version of the story I told you guys, with like our team members included and all of this stuff. So
I love that.
If you're interested,
we'll put that in our show notes for sure.
And that's
in the show notes.
I think that's podcast.zencastr.com. We'll get you there.
Send that over to us as well, so we can put it in our notes just to make sure.
Yep.
And then we'll love to throw that in our show notes. So if you love this story, he's got a much longer version available on his own podcast. So go listen to that one. I bet you, he might even go through all the places that he lived in the past 15 years. I don't know, Josh. That might be awesome, but cool. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. Anything you want to say before we jump off?
No, I just want to say you're the man. I'll be following you. I think what you're doing is super cool. So
yeah,
awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. It's been my pleasure, and love to stay in touch.
Yeah,
will do.